The massive Imperial ship appeared without warning in Earth's orbit one quiet Tuesday morning. Its dark metal hull stretched over 20 kilometers in length, blocking out the sun over half of North America. Fighter jets scrambled from bases worldwide, but everyone knew their missiles would be useless against something of that size. Commander Mark Thompson stood at the window of Earth Defense Force headquarters, his weathered face reflecting in the glass as he watched the alien vessel. After 30 years in the military, he had prepared for many scenarios, but nothing quite like this. The radio chatter from worldwide military commands filled the room behind him, a mix of languages united by their shared concern. "Sir," his assistant called out, "they're broadcasting on all frequencies." The alien message was simple and clear. "We are the Galactic Empire. Your world has been noticed. Prepare to receive our diplomatic delegation in 1 hour at these coordinates." The message included a location: the United Nations headquarters in New York. Thompson arrived at the UN building 50 minutes later, joined by world leaders who had been rushed there by supersonic aircraft. The atmosphere was tense but controlled. Military personnel from a dozen nations stood guard, though everyone understood their weapons would likely mean nothing against an empire capable of interstellar travel. Right on schedule, a beam of light appeared in the center of the General Assembly Hall. 3 figures materialized: tall, humanoid beings wearing ornate armor that seemed to shift colors in the light. Their leader stepped forward, his presence commanding attention without effort. "I am High Lord Nexus, Imperial Ambassador of the Eternal Galactic Empire," he announced in perfect English, his voice carrying a metallic undertone. "We rule over 10,000 star systems and have brought prosperity to countless worlds." He paused, his silver eyes scanning the room. "Your species has shown remarkable progress for being confined to a single solar system. This has brought you to our attention." Thompson noticed how the alien ambassador spoke, not with anger or cruelty, but with the casual indifference of someone who had performed this ritual hundreds of times before. This wasn't a unique event for them. It was routine. "We offer you the opportunity to join our empire," Nexus continued. "Your world will benefit from our technology, our protection, and our guidance. Your industries will serve the greater good of the empire, and your military forces will be incorporated into our Grand Armada." One of the world leaders stepped forward, the Secretary General of the UN. "And if we wish to remain independent?" High Lord Nexus smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Independence is an illusion that primitive species cling to. The galaxy is vast and filled with dangers you cannot imagine. We offer protection and advancement. The alternative—" He waved his hand, and a holographic display appeared, showing massive warships. "The alternative would be unfortunate." Thompson studied the images carefully. Despite the show of force, he noticed something in the aliens' demeanor, a subtle arrogance, a hint of boredom. This wasn't a negotiation. It was a formality. The Empire expected them to fall in line, just as countless others had before. "We request time to consider your generous offer," Thompson spoke up, choosing his words carefully. "Our world has many nations, many leaders. We need time to reach a consensus." The Imperial Ambassador looked almost amused. "Such primitive political systems, but very well. You have one standard week. We are nothing if not merciful." With another wave of his hand, the hologram disappeared. "When we return, we expect your complete surrender and integration into the Empire. For your sake, do not disappoint us." The aliens vanished in another flash of light, leaving the hall in silence. Thompson's mind was already racing, analyzing everything he'd seen. The Empire's technology was impressive, but their attitude revealed weaknesses. They were complacent, routine-bound, and utterly convinced of their superiority. As the hall erupted into urgent discussions, Thompson quietly slipped away to make some calls. They had 1 week to prepare, and he had already begun forming a plan. The Empire thought they were dealing with a primitive species that would simply bow down before their superior might. They were about to learn how dangerous that assumption could be. The next 7 days were the busiest in human history. While the Imperial ship loomed in orbit like a hanging sword, Earth's military and scientific communities worked around the clock. Commander Thompson had called an emergency meeting just hours after the aliens left, gathering the world's best minds in a secure underground facility in Colorado. Admiral Jane Wilson walked into the main strategy room, her tablet filled with analysis of the Imperial ship's footage. The room was packed with military leaders, scientists, and engineers from 30 different nations. For the first time in history, old enemies sat side by side, united by a common threat. "Look at this," she said, pointing to a frozen image of the Imperial warship. "Their shield technology creates a visible distortion field. It's impressive, but it's also their weakness." She zoomed in on specific sections of the massive vessel. They rely completely on these energy shields. Their actual hull is relatively thin. Thompson nodded, remembering how the aliens had proudly displayed their technology. They've grown overconfident. They don't even try to hide their shield generators. He turned to the room. "How quickly can we adapt our EMP weapons?" A scientist from India raised his hand. "We've been studying the electromagnetic pulses from solar flares for years. With the right modifications, we could create focused EMP bursts that might overload their shield systems." The next few days became a blur of activity. While political leaders pretended to debate the Empire's terms, every major military and research facility worked at full speed. Mining companies converted their equipment into makeshift weapons. Stealth technology, originally designed for aircraft, was quickly adapted for space vessels. The biggest challenge was keeping everything hidden from the Imperial ship's sensors. They used underground facilities, worked during the night when the ship was on the other side of Earth, and masked their activities with false signals. The Empire's arrogance worked in their favor. They weren't even looking for signs of resistance. "They expect us to be primitive," Thompson told his team on the fourth day. "Let's use that. Every piece of human technology they've seen has been basic. Commercial satellites, simple rockets, radio signals. They think that's all we have." Admiral Wilson developed what they called Operation David, named after the biblical story of David and Goliath. Instead of building large warships to match the Empire's, they focused on small, agile vessels that could hide among asteroids and space debris. Each ship was equipped with modified mining lasers, EMP weapons, and experimental stealth technology. By the sixth day, Earth had assembled a hidden fleet of over 300 small ships, scattered throughout the solar system. They weren't beautiful or impressive. Most were converted mining vessels or hastily upgraded satellites, but they were armed and ready. "Remember," Wilson told the pilots during their final briefing, "we're not trying to match their strength. We're going to hit them where they're weak. They expect a straightforward surrender or a hopeless frontal assault. They don't expect us to think differently." On the last night before the Empire's deadline, Thompson stood in the command center, watching the dozens of screens showing Earth's preparations. Regular military forces were positioned to make it look like Earth was preparing for a desperate ground defense. Meanwhile, their real forces waited silently in space, powered down to avoid detection. "Sir," a young officer approached him. "The last ships are in position. All pilots report ready." Thompson looked at the clock. In 12 hours, the Empire would return for their answer. They expected to find a primitive species ready to kneel before their superior might. Instead, they would face an enemy they had never expected, one that had turned their own arrogance into a weapon. "Send the final code," he ordered. "All ships maintain radio silence until the signal." He turned to Admiral Wilson, who stood beside him. "Now we wait." As the hours ticked down, Earth's hidden fleet lay in wait, ready to teach the Empire a lesson about underestimating their opponents. The next day would change the galaxy forever, though not in the way the Empire imagined. The Imperial fleet arrived exactly on schedule. This time, it wasn't just one ship. Over 50 massive warships emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the solar system. Each vessel was bigger than Earth's largest cities, their hulls gleaming with the same color-shifting metal as the ambassador's armor. In Earth's hidden command center deep under the Rocky Mountains, Commander Thompson watched the sensor readings with forced calm. The Empire's ships moved in a perfect formation, like dancers in a deadly ballet. Their confidence was clear in every movement. "They're broadcasting," a communications officer announced. The familiar voice of High Lord Nexus filled the command center. "People of Earth, your time for deliberation has ended. We see you have chosen to position your primitive military forces in a defensive stance. This is unfortunate but not unexpected from a species at your level of development." Admiral Wilson stood beside Thompson, both watching the main screen as more Imperial ships appeared. "They're following exactly the pattern we predicted," she whispered, not even bothering to scan for threats beyond the obvious. The Imperial ships spread out in a standard attack formation, exactly as shown in their earlier holographic display. They hadn't bothered to change their tactics. Why should they? In their minds, they were dealing with primitives who had never left their own solar system. "Your attempt at resistance is noted," Nexus continued, his voice carrying that same bored tone from their first meeting. "However, the Empire's mercy has limits. Surrender now, and we will minimize the damage to your population centers." Thompson picked up the main communication line, playing his part. "This is Earth Defense Command. We request one final meeting to discuss terms." His voice shook slightly, not from fear, but from the effort of containing his anticipation. The Empire's response was predictable. Their forward ships launched what they clearly expected to be an overwhelming first strike. Energy beams lanced out from their massive weapons, targeting Earth's visible military installations. Their sensors showed exactly what Earth wanted them to see: panicking ground forces, scattered resistance, and a few pathetic attempts to launch old-style nuclear missiles that their shields easily deflected. "Status of our real forces," Thompson asked quietly. "All ships maintaining position," Wilson reported. "The Empire's sensors are focused entirely on Earth and near-Earth orbit. They haven't spotted a single one of our hidden units." The Imperial fleet moved closer, their formation spreading wider as they prepared to encircle the planet. Their communication channels were filled with casual chatter, officers discussing how quickly this primitive world would fall, making bets on how many minutes it would take to force a surrender. Then something unexpected happened. Their sensors detected Earth's defensive satellites powering down. Ground installations went dark. It looked like Earth's primitive technology was failing under the pressure. "How disappointing," High Lord Nexus's voice came through again. "We had hoped you might at least provide an interesting challenge. The Empire will now demonstrate the price of futile resistance." The Imperial fleet moved into their final attack position, their massive ships now spread throughout Earth's orbital space. They had positioned themselves exactly where Admiral Wilson had predicted they would, their rigid tactics making them perfectly predictable. In the command center, Thompson looked at the tactical display one last time. The Empire's ships were now perfectly positioned, their formation spread thin to surround Earth. They had no idea that their carefully planned encirclement had just placed them exactly where Earth's hidden fleet needed them to be. "They're in position," Wilson said quietly. "All ships report ready." Thompson took a deep breath. The Empire thought they were about to demonstrate their overwhelming power. Instead, they were about to learn a harsh lesson about underestimating their opponents. "Send the signal," he ordered. "Operation David begins now." Throughout the solar system, hundreds of hidden ships powered up their systems, ready to strike. The real battle for Earth was about to begin. The first Imperial ship never saw what hit it. One moment, the massive warship was preparing to launch its final attack on Earth. The next, its shield generators exploded as three small Earth vessels emerged from behind a cluster of space debris, their modified mining lasers cutting through the now exposed hull like butter. "First blood," Admiral Wilson announced in the command center, her eyes fixed on the tactical display. Around her, officers watched in amazement as the mighty Imperial vessel's lights flickered and died. "All ships, execute your assigned targets." Throughout the solar system, Earth's hidden fleet sprang into action. Converted mining ships appeared from their hiding spots in the asteroid belt. Stealth vessels powered up from within the shadows of communication satellites. Each human ship was tiny compared to the Imperial vessels, but they moved with purpose and precision. The Empire's response was slow and confused. Their commanders had never faced an enemy that refused to fight according to proper military doctrine. Their massive ships tried to turn and engage the human vessels, but they were too slow, too clumsy. They're like old sailing ships trying to catch speedboats, Thompson observed, watching as another Imperial vessel lost its shields to a coordinated EMP strike. The human ships darted in, fired, and vanished back into the debris field before the Empire could respond. On the main command channel, High Lord Nexus's voice had lost its bored tone. "What trickery is this? Face us in proper combat, you primitives." His demand was met with silence as 3 more Imperial ships reported shield failures. The human fleet moved like a swarm of angry bees, striking from multiple directions at once. They used tactics developed by Earth's naval commanders, treating space like an ocean filled with islands of asteroids and debris. The Empire's ships were forced to split up, trying to chase enemies they could barely track. Group 7 hit their flagship's port shield generator, Wilson ordered. Groups 3 and 4 keep those escort ships busy. The human ships moved with practiced coordination, each group knowing their role in the complex dance of battle. A young officer monitoring Imperial communications reported with barely contained excitement. Their commanders are arguing with each other. They can't agree on how to respond. Thompson nodded grimly. The Empire's rigid command structure was working against them. Their captains waited for orders from above, while Earth's ships acted independently, each commander authorized to make tactical decisions based on the situation. The battle spread across the solar system. Imperial ships fired massive energy weapons into empty space, frustrated by enemies that refused to stand and fight. The humans responded with quick strikes at vital systems, shield generators, sensor arrays, weapon ports. They never tried to destroy the massive ships outright, just disable them piece by piece. "Status report," Thompson called out. 12 Imperial ships completely disabled, came the response. 8 more have partial shield failures. We've lost 7 of our ships, but most crews managed to eject safely. The Empire still hasn't found our primary staging areas. The Imperial fleet's perfect formation had completely broken down. Some ships clustered together for protection, making themselves easier targets. Others chased sensor ghosts, falling for decoy signals planted days before. Their overwhelming firepower meant nothing if they couldn't hit their targets. In the midst of the chaos, a small group of human ships approached the Imperial flagship. They darted through the debris field, using chunks of destroyed vessels as cover. The flagship's escorts were busy chasing other targets, leaving its rear shield generator exposed. "This is Strike Team Alpha." The team leader's voice crackled over the comm. "We have a clear shot at their command ship. Permission to execute." Admiral Wilson looked at Thompson, who nodded. "Permission granted," she said. "Show them what Earth can do." The strike team emerged from cover, their weapons charged. The Empire was about to learn another costly lesson about underestimating humanity's ability to fight back. The battle near Mars would be remembered as the moment everything changed. The Imperial flagship, still reeling from Strike Team Alpha's attack on its shields, limped toward the red planet seeking cover. High Lord Nexus had abandoned his usual communication channel, no longer interested in broadcasting his superiority to the primitives who had damaged his mighty vessel. "They're gathering their remaining ships around Mars," Admiral Wilson reported, watching the tactical display. 23 vessels, all damaged to some degree. Her eyes narrowed as she studied their formation. "They're trying to use Mars's magnetic field to protect against our EMP weapons." Thompson allowed himself a small smile. "They're learning, but not fast enough." He turned to the science team that had been monitoring Mars's magnetic field for the past hour. "Are we ready?" The lead scientist, Dr. Peters, nodded eagerly. "The magnetic field isn't their shield. It's our weapon. All we need to do is trigger it. Across the solar system, the battle had evolved. The Empire's surviving ships had finally adapted some of their tactics, moving in smaller groups and trying to predict where Earth's vessels might strike from. But it was too late. Their crews were exhausted, their shields were weakened, and their confidence was shattered. All ships, move to Phase 2 positions, Wilson ordered. Earth's fleet responded immediately, taking up positions around Mars in a carefully planned pattern. The Empire's commanders, still thinking in terms of traditional warfare, assumed they were being surrounded for a final assault. Their weapons are charging, a sensor operator reported. They're expecting a frontal attack. Thompson keyed the general command channel. All ships, power down non-essential systems. Begin magnetic pulse sequence on my mark. The human fleet fell dark, looking like dead ships to Imperial scanners. The Empire took the bait. Their remaining vessels turned their attention to the seemingly helpless human ships, charging their main weapons for what they thought would be a devastating final strike. High Lord Nexus's voice finally returned to the command channel, though his usual calm had been replaced by barely contained rage. "You have fought well for primitives," he announced, "but now you will witness the true power of the Imperial fleet. Your resistance ends here." "Mark," Thompson said quietly. Dr. Peters activated the device his team had spent the last week building. It sent a precise signal into Mars's magnetic field, turning the planet's natural magnetosphere into a massive electromagnetic weapon. The pulse was unlike anything the Empire had ever faced, not a direct attack, but a massive wave that used their own shield technology against them. The effect was immediate and devastating. Imperial shields didn't just fail, they collapsed catastrophically, overloading ships' power systems in a cascade of failures. The mighty vessels that had threatened Earth just hours ago now floated helpless, their systems fried by an attack they hadn't believed possible. "Direct hit on all targets," the sensor operator reported, his voice filled with awe. 23 Imperial ships disabled. Their weapons, engines, and life support are all offline. In the command center, Thompson watched as emergency pods began launching from the stricken Imperial vessels. The mighty Empire's crews were abandoning their ships, forced to trust in the mercy of the primitives they had come to conquer. "Send in the rescue teams," Wilson ordered. "Let's show them how primitives treat their defeated enemies." The last transmission from High Lord Nexus's flagship was very different from his first message to Earth. Gone was the condescension, replaced by something that sounded almost like respect. We surrender. Please assist our crews." As Earth's ships moved in to rescue the stranded Imperial crews, Thompson thought about how much had changed in just a few days. The Empire had come expecting an easy conquest. Instead, they had received a harsh lesson about the danger of underestimating their opponents. "Send word to Earth," he ordered. "The Battle of Mars is over. Operation David is a success." News of the Empire's defeat spread across the galaxy faster than their fastest ships could travel. The story seemed impossible. A single-planet civilization had not only resisted the Imperial fleet, but had defeated it using technology that the Empire's best minds had dismissed as primitive. In the week following the Battle of Mars, Earth's ships helped rescue over 10,000 Imperial crew members. The proud warriors of the Empire found themselves being treated in Earth's hospitals, eating Earth's food, and slowly realizing that the primitives were far more advanced than they had imagined. Commander Thompson stood in a hospital room, watching through a window as doctors treated injured Imperial soldiers. High Lord Nexus lay in one of the beds, his color-shifting armor replaced with a simple hospital gown. The mighty ambassador looked smaller somehow, more ordinary. "Your medical technology is surprising," Nexus admitted when Thompson entered the room. "We assumed you were centuries behind us. Yet your doctors understood our biology within hours." "We've had a lot of practice adapting quickly," Thompson replied. "When you live on a world with thousands of different species, you learn to be flexible." The real shock came 3 days later. A new fleet arrived at the edge of the solar system, Not a battle fleet this time, but diplomatic vessels. The Empire's ruling council had sent their highest-ranking peace negotiator, along with engineers who were desperately trying to understand how Earth had turned their own shield technology against them. Admiral Wilson met with the Imperial engineers, carefully revealing only what Earth wanted them to know. "Your shield design is impressive," she told them, "but it's too rigid, too dependent on predictable energy patterns. Sometimes the simplest solutions are the best." The peace talks were unlike anything the Empire had ever experienced. Usually, they dictated terms to defeated enemies. But this time was different. Earth had captured intact Imperial ships, rescued their crews, and proved they could defeat the Empire's best technology. More importantly, other civilizations throughout the galaxy were watching. 3 minor systems have already declared their independence, a junior Imperial diplomat reported nervously to his superiors. "They say if Earth could defeat us, they can too. Our reputation for invincibility is shattered." In the command center, Thompson reviewed reports from across the galaxy. The Empire's grip on power had been built on fear and a reputation for being unbeatable. Now that reputation was gone, replaced by stories of how their mighty ships had been defeated by converted mining vessels and clever tactics. "They're offering us full independence," Wilson announced, returning from the latest negotiation session, "plus a non-aggression treaty and trade rights with all Imperial worlds." She smiled slightly. "They're also requesting that we share our shield-breaking technology with them." "Tell them we'll consider it," Thompson replied, knowing that Earth would keep that secret safe. The Empire's weakness was too valuable to give away. The Imperial retreat was orderly but hurried. Their damaged ships were towed away by massive repair vessels, their rescued crews were returned, and their diplomats made polite but quick farewells. The Empire was eager to leave Earth's solar system before they lost any more face. As the last Imperial ship disappeared into hyperspace, Thompson received an unexpected message from High Lord Nexus. "You have taught us a valuable lesson," the former ambassador wrote. "The Empire grew complacent in its power, forgot what it meant to face a worthy opponent. Perhaps this defeat will help us remember who we once were." Earth celebrated its victory quietly, knowing that this was just the beginning. The galaxy was watching them now, seeing not the primitives the Empire had dismissed, but a civilization that had done the impossible. Humanity had proved that innovation and adaptability could overcome even the mightiest empire. "What do we do now?" Wilson asked, standing with Thompson as they watched the stars. "Now," Thompson replied, "we prepare for whatever comes next." The galaxy just got a lot more interesting. 1 year after the Battle of Mars, Earth had changed in ways no one could have predicted. The planet's first official galactic embassy opened in Geneva, with representatives from 30 different alien civilizations seeking friendship with the world that had humbled the mighty empire. Ships from distant stars now regularly visited Earth's ports, bringing trade, technology, and new ideas. Commander Thompson, recently promoted to admiral, stood at his familiar window in the Earth Defense Force headquarters. This time, instead of watching an imperial threat, he observed a busy sky filled with vessels of all sizes and shapes. Earth had become a symbol of hope for countless worlds. The latest report from the outer systems, Admiral Wilson said, entering his office with a tablet. She too had received a promotion, now serving as Earth's chief diplomat to the galaxy. 3 more colonies have peacefully separated from the Empire. They're requesting our help in developing defensive systems. The Empire itself was going through massive changes. The defeat by Earth had forced them to face hard truths about their civilization. Their rigid military structure was being reformed, their arrogant attitudes toward lesser species were shifting, and their technology was being redesigned to be more flexible and adaptive. "They're learning," Thompson observed, reading a report about Imperial ships now using smaller, more mobile vessels alongside their massive warships. "Though I noticed they still haven't figured out how we use Mars's magnetic field against them." Earth's own technology had advanced rapidly, combining their innovation with knowledge gained from their new allies. but they were careful not to repeat the Empire's mistakes. Each new development was tested not just for power, but for adaptability and creative uses. "The Mining Guild wants to show you their new designs," Wilson mentioned, pulling up images of ships that combined Earth's practical engineering with advanced alien technology. "They're calling it the Thompson class. Small, tough, and cleverer than it looks." Thompson smiled at that. Earth's converted mining ships had become famous throughout the galaxy, proving that the best solutions weren't always the most obvious ones. Several alien civilizations had started adapting their own industrial vessels for defensive purposes, learning from Earth's example. The biggest change, however, was in how the galaxy viewed humanity. Earth had earned respect not through conquest or intimidation, but by proving that intelligence and adaptability could overcome seemingly insurmountable odds. Their victory had inspired countless others to think differently about their own capabilities. "Message from the Imperial Reform Council," a young officer announced, entering with a new report. "They're requesting Earth's participation in their military training programs. They want their officers to learn what they call human tactical creativity." Wilson laughed at that. "Quite a change from calling us primitives, isn't it?" Earth's influence continued to grow, but not through force or empire building. Instead, they became known as problem solvers, innovators, and defenders of independence. Their ships were welcomed across the galaxy not as conquerors, but as friends who had proved that size and power weren't everything. "Sometimes I wonder," Thompson said, watching a group of alien children touring the Earth Defense Force Museum, "what would have happened if the Empire had simply asked for friendship instead of demanding submission?" "They couldn't have," Wilson replied. "They didn't know how, but they're learning now, thanks to us." The museum's main exhibit showed the Battle of Mars, with holographic displays demonstrating how Earth's tiny fleet had outmaneuvered the mighty Imperial Armada. But next to it was a newer display, showing Imperial and Earth ships working together to protect trade routes and explore new regions of space. As the sun set over Earth's busiest spaceport, ships from 100 worlds moved peacefully through the sky. The Empire had come seeking to conquer a primitive world, but instead had found something far more valuable, a civilization that could teach them how to be better than they were. "Ready for the Galactic Council meeting?" Wilson asked, checking the time. Thompson nodded, straightening his uniform. Earth now had a permanent seat on the council, not because of their power or territory, but because they had shown the galaxy a better way forward. The Empire's humiliation had led not to chaos, but to positive change throughout the stars. "The galaxy's a different place now," he said as they walked out. "And I think it's better for it."